So, tell me your name and where you're from.
Sure. So my name's Josh. I'm from Wellington, New Zealand.
And so, where in New Zealand is that? To the north, to the south?
So that's at the bottom of the North Island. There's two main islands here, the Island and the South Island. There is another fairly well-known island down the very, very bottom called Stewart Island. I'm on the Northern Island, but the very bottom tip of it. And so the capital city, Wellington, is the city that I live in, and that's right at the bottom of the North Island.
And so, you guys just had an election recently. Was this for the? And is it a prime minister you have there, or?
Yeah, it is a prime minister we have here.
And then, so was the prime minister up for re-election, and then as well as a marijuana ballot or resolution?
So we use the MMP system, mixed member of parliament. So what we're effectively doing is we're voting for a party, and then the party leader becomes the prime minister.
Okay, yeah. So
Uh,
I believe that's what they do in Canada as well. Something similar to that.
I think so, yeah.
And so there was was it a resolution or some sort of a ballot to legalize marijuana nationally, or what?
So that was a referendum, which is not at all legally binding. It's effectively a way for the public to, I guess, voice their opinion, I suppose. And it's kind of like a vote, but it's non-legally binding, really. We've had many referendums in the past where public opinion has been completely ignored. So it's really just a way of it's a way of I suppose an initiator allowing the public to express their opinion on matters.
Okay, and it did not pass.
No, I think it was something like it was a 60% no, and about a 40% yes, or something like that. I think there are still a few more days for what they call special votes to be counted, which is for largely for people who have New Zealand citizenship but live overseas. But it's not looking like it's going to get across the line.
Yeah, we have the presidential election tomorrow here, and it's President Trump versus former Vice President Joe Biden, and so a big part of it will be the absentee ballots, which not just like our troops overseas, but a lot of people have been already voting absentee ballot for the last month or so, and so they're saying that it might look like Trump won tomorrow night, but that after all the absentee ballots are counted, he might actually end up losing the election, and it's a very, very crazy time here right now. Did you guys in New Zealand see protests this summer about the police? I mean, when there was a man by the name of George Floyd who was killed by the police here in the States, there was protests all over the United States, and I know some of them even expanded out to England. I think I even heard about protests in Australia as well.
I don't think there were any really large-scale protests happening in New Zealand. I think I heard that there was a small gathering of people near Parliament, but I don't think it was very many. Um, we obviously hear a lot about it because a lot of our media comes from the US, but I don't think we saw much impact here.
And so you do music there in New Zealand?
I do, yeah.
What kind of music do you do?
So I guess primarily the kind of music that I'm involved with is what you call sound system music. And so that's music that is specifically designed in such a way that in order to properly hear it, you have to have a full sound system rig in order for the sound to actually translate. So it effectively means if you're listening to it on laptop speakers or headphones or something like that, you're effectively missing about somewhere between 60 to 80% of music is just plain missing. The other key difference with music, sound system music played on a proper sound system, is it's no longer an experience that's just audio. It becomes a tactile, physical sensation because ultra low frequency vibrations are actually physically felt by the body. The slower the vibration, effectively, the easier it is to feel it. And obviously, in order for that to happen, you need to have extremely large amplifications. So, we're looking at, a sort of average fundamental note of probably 30 to maybe 40 hertz tops. And lots of sound systems of probably anywhere between 50 and 100 kilowatts is sort of standard for that kind of music.
And so, from what I've heard, New Zealand has, I believe, had a lot lower numbers as far as COVID-19 cases than the rest of the planet. I mean, has there been a lot of restrictions put on the people? Is it just the fact that you guys are so far away from larger populations? I mean, how do you think that happened, that you ended up with less cases there?
Well, look, I'm no epidemiologist, but at a guess, I'd say there are probably several factors. Probably first and foremost, you're right, we're very far away from everything. And so it's a lot harder for anything to physically get here. Of course, when you're dealing with something like a virus, once it is here, it can spread. But also, New Zealand has a very low population for its landmass. So we're physically a small landmass. And we also only have a population of about 4 million across the entire country. I think, if I remember correctly, I think almost half of that's in one city in Auckland, the very north. Once you space people out, social distancing is, well, it's kind of already happening by default here anyway, because there's so few people for the amount of land here. And so I think that those two factors probably contribute to the decreased number of cases in comparison to a lot of other countries. That said, though, there are other countries that are actually quite densely populated that have also seen great success. So Singapore, for example, they have a much denser population than New Zealand, and they also had almost zero impact from COVID on public health. But that's because they closed their borders almost immediately upon finding out that the virus existed. I think with New Zealand, we waited quite a bit of time before closing our borders. So we could have theoretically had zero cases whatsoever if we'd closed our borders immediately, like Singapore had. But we didn't. But, it was sort of mitigated by the fact that, like I said, we're so far away, we're so spaced apart because we're not very densely populated. There was once the government response did take effect, there was a lockdown in effect. I think it was full lockdown, lasted, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, if I remember correctly. And then there was a gradual kind of roll off back down to what I suppose you'd call normal life afterwards.
I mean, our lockdown, I think, when it first started, I think it was almost like every state was shut down for pretty much 2 months, and several states are still have higher restrictions, and then some states they've pretty much done nothing. So what has been the effect then on the music scene there in New Zealand? I mean, are they still able to have shows? And
well, look, there's some pros and cons to it. So first and foremost, we had to forego some shows because of lockdown and because of COVID. There was actually an international that we'd already booked to come over to New Zealand. He was from the UK, but obviously we had to let that show go. There was no way for him to fly during that time. So it's very difficult to get international artists over to New Zealand. Even more difficult than usual because New Zealand's so far away from everything. It's already difficult, and now it's pretty much impossible. Not completely impossible, but pretty close. But actually, that's been a bit of a blessing in disguise, I think. And the reason I say that is, I suppose culture in New Zealand is we sort of look at ourselves as, I suppose, something like, I suppose you'd say maybe the underdog or something like that. We have a small population. We don't have as much, economic power and or those sorts of things. And so what that means is often we look to other countries to look for the pinnacle of whatever we're interested in, whether that be music or anything else. And so sort of historically in the past, New Zealanders going to music shows have been really excited about seeing artists from, the US or the UK or Europe or something like that, because we sort of perceive that, there's way more people over there, all the best artists come from overseas. But I think people are starting to see now that there's actually a lot of talent in this country that has, in the past, kind of been ignored because people perhaps have gotten a little bit more excited about international artists than perhaps they should have. And so what we're seeing now is a lot more shows in New Zealand where different organizations within the country are flying different artists from other parts of the country into their city. And so local New Zealand artists are actually getting a lot more of the spotlight, and they're actually getting to sort of demonstrate that in New Zealand we actually have quite a lot of talent and quite a lot of high level ability when it comes to music and performance. And so I think that's a really good thing. It's great for the sort of grassroots movement. It's great for improving the overall quality as a whole, and it's great for, I think, our self-perception. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. In terms of shows, I mean, obviously during lockdown that wasn't possible. I had to cancel a couple of shows, but that appears to be, knock on wood, a thing of the past. And so shows are more or less going ahead as usual. Just like I said, not so much internationals, just more locals.
All right. So last question: where can people see your music?
Okay, so there's probably a few ways that you can find out about our shows. So the main show that I'm involved with is called Section 9. And so we have a Facebook and an Instagram page. If you were to just go onto Instagram or Facebook and type in Section 9 NZ, NZ's for New Zealand, obviously. That's probably the easiest way to find our shows. We do also put up shows on rosters for event and ticketing websites such as Event Finder, Under the Radar, those kinds of places. And the vast majority of our shows are at a venue called Valhalla, which is in Wellington, New Zealand. But that said, if you're interested in these kinds of shows and you're not necessarily in the capital city, you're elsewhere in New Zealand, let's say you were traveling to New Zealand and you just wanted to see something like that, just to find out what it was about, there is a group for sound system music for New Zealand. It's called the Sound System Community New Zealand page, Sound System Community NZ, and that's again a Facebook group, which is I think we're about 1,500 members at the moment, and that's probably the best way to find out about sound system shows all across the country.
Okay. All right. Well, Josh, thank you very much for your time, and sorry it took so long to get the connection going.
No problem. Thanks, Miles. Really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for coming on. Bye-bye.
Take care.